At this time, I'd like to welcome Mary Black to the stage. She's from Freedom Project Education, and she's been instrumental in helping our group kind of sort through the opt-out scenarios that are going on in Wisconsin. There seems to be a lot of confusion when parents send in their opt-out forms to their school district. They're having a lot of pushback. They're getting all the stories that you heard today, that our report card's going to suffer, or we're going to lose money, or they have all kinds of excuses. There's only certain grades that are allowed to opt out. So I welcome Mary up and join us in our panel discussion. I have a list of questions. Thank you. I just went through all the questions, and I got some great ones, and we're going to be going through those in a second. I know we're running a little bit over, but I know it's important for a lot of people to get their questions. So one thing I will say is we will get all of these answered on our website. It'll be protectyourchildsfuture.org. We have our action plan on there, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. But just know that we are going to go after the people that are not being cooperative in Wisconsin. We are going to name names. The Chamber of Commerce is a perfect example. They are supporting Common Core fully, and there's no reason they should other than they stand to benefit financially from Common Core. So we want to do that. I want to be clear, we have an election coming up. We need to look at exactly where our representatives stand on Common Core. Governor Walker has made it clear that he wants to repeal Common Core, and they're working on legislation as we speak, with bills being introduced in January, and that's when we need to be ready to go. When that legislation starts to hit, we need to make sure that we're informing our legislators where we stand on Common Core and what we expect them to do. So that's going to be very important. I encourage you to go to our website. Again, protectyourchildsfuture.org, and we have our action plan on there as well. We list some. You saw the petitions that we had outside. I encourage you all to sign those. I think that's important that we send a message. We're going to go make sure that Scott Fitzgerald understands that we do not hold Luther Olson as a head of the education committee because we think he failed miserably in helping out the students and families in Wisconsin. Continue to share your knowledge, join a group in your community, continue this effort. This needs to continue to grow. And I think once the assessments hit in the spring, as Jeff was talking about, they're going to damage your children, and the movement is going to grow to the point that they will not be able to stop and listen to us. All right, the first question.
Have them take one of the home copies, have their friends sign.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we do have copies that you can take home as well and have those petitions filled out among your friends and neighbors. We also have opt-out forms available if anybody doesn't have them. They're available online, but we have some here as well. Ed's holding them up right back here. So if anybody needs one, raise their hand and they'll hand them out for you. Now I'll get to our first question for Sam Ostotsky. I keep hearing that teachers were not involved in formulating Common Core. By my understanding is there were many educators all over the country that were allowed to review and give feedback during the drafting. Is this true or false?
If they were, we don't know who they were or what they actually contributed because there are no records of them. If you look at the names that are on Common Core's own website for reviewers, for the people who are on the standards development work groups, for being on the validation committee, there were extremely few who came from the schools. Most teachers had no knowledge in their own schools of what was happening.
I remember taking Iowa basic tests at elementary school. How does this testing change from them? Have you want to take that one forward? Dr. Johnson?
Well, the testing is now significantly different. You don't need your number 2 pencil, and you don't need to fill in the bubble fully. So the first thing is they're given on computers, which gives parents or gives a lot of people that look at it sort of a gee whiz type of better and like, finally we're doing things right. But in reality, that poses some problems for some children that might have problems with dealing with the computers. And the other thing is what Dr. Thompson said, they're adapted. That is a significant change from how testing used to be. If you get the question right, you get a harder question. If you get the question wrong, you get an easier question. And I know Dr. Thompson talked about the fear that creates, or the anxiety, but it also allows your students to play games with it, right? So let's say I don't really feel particularly engaged in taking a test today. The Iowa test used to go off to whoever corrected them, the testing outfit, and would typically come back to the school district, and then summary information to the district was given to the state. You now have the whole thing, the whole personally identifiable question-by-question content, because they can, because it's on a network of computers and it's easy to do, it all just goes to the state. So it's all centrally located and ultimately could be networked, and this infrastructure is being laid right now, it's possibly nationwide as well. So those are really the differences.
Thank you. I'm going to throw this one to Mary because I think we've had this question a couple of times. Some district administrators say that the opt-out only applies to testing in grades 4, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Therefore, opting out in grades 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, 3, 5, 6, and 7 is not possible by law. Please address this.
I will say that the research I've done is that many school districts are bullying the parents. There was a couple in Georgia who innocently thought they had the right to opt out their children and ended up having to do battle with the superintendent. Their 5th grader was scheduled to go on a field trip the day after the test was completed, and the 5th grader was told that he or she would have to miss the field trip because it would be mandatory for her or him to make up the test that day, and they weren't going to budge. I think eventually the parents won out, but the story is repeated, I think, throughout many states. The schools are now bullying the parents.
Sure.
I think any parent who is told anything by a school authority should simply say, show me the statute. That's all. There are no statutes that
I would also ask the superintendent or whoever's questioning your authority, what right do you have for me to refuse for my child to take the test? Show me where you have the authority to take away my parental rights. That would be the question I would ask. You have every right as a parent. My local school board president told me that Common Core, that it's not a Common Core issue, it is a curriculum issue. But aren't they one and the same, especially since I have heard the same thing from 2 different state and school districts? Sandra, you take it away?
It's commonly claimed that Common Core is simply a set of standards, and indeed, they are words on paper that claim to be only standards, but they entail taking tests based on those standards, and the curriculum is built into the guidelines for the testing company and are being developed to follow the curriculum. And indeed, in math, it does require a particular curriculum that will include those topics. ELA has other curriculum requirements that are built into the way it distributes its reading standards. So it's a distinction without a difference.
Thank you. Focus on Dr. Thompson. How can teachers perform when they are stressed?
They can.
Who at the state or local level can provide truly accurate information as to what data points are being collected? Anybody want to take that one?
I may not have heard the complete question. You're asking about how the government, how the parents know where the data is going, is that correct?
What data points are being collected?
Also,
We have a list of data points that are out there, but it's up to the individual districts exactly what information they record and what they send to the state, so there is some flexibility.
my answer would be unlimited, unlimited, because at least 400 points, I think, are identified in the model, and with technology, even the sensors that are in promoting grid tenacity the censors, so I think anything and everything is open.
I think Mary is absolutely right about that. There's a recent story that Eagle Forum just reported a story about a father of four, I believe father of 4 or 5 children, who went to his school district and wanted to see the data that was being collected on his children, and was told that if he wanted to see the data on his children, which included in the state of Nevada, at least in this particular district, over 800 data points, that he was going to have to fork over $10,000 to build a system that the state had neglected to build for retrieval that could then deliver that information to parents. Parents' rights were not even vaguely considered in building the systems in Nevada, nor frankly have they been anywhere. But when you think about that, that's double the data points that are in the model. 800.
I have something else too. In addition to these data points, just the answers to these exams. If you look at the AIR's website, it has a lot of this information about how these tests are designed. They're not just scoring their answers and whether they were right or wrong. Okay? They're scoring how long it took you to answer them, how many times you changed your answer, in addition. Okay, so there's a lot of things about how someone's mind is functioning at the time it's being stored in addition to just whether it's right or wrong. So it's a lot of information on a day-to-day basis for kids.
Thank you. Somebody asked, will the session be available by video on the web? We will be doing everything we can to get this out there so more people can see it. You can see the video cameras we've had rolling. We will be editing those and get those on the web as soon as possible. Check our website. We will definitely publish it there and link to wherever it ends up, whether it's YouTube or some other site. So watch for that. What exams did you opt out of? ACT, Smarter Balanced, are there any others?
You should definitely opt out of Smarter Balanced. In general, my suggestion that the language you could use would be opt out of any exams or assessments that have to do with going into value-added measures for teachers, anything that counts towards that, or will be shared outside the district. The recent STAR tests, for instance, I've looked into. Those are, as most students in public school just completed those, are usually, you should check this with your district, but are usually kept in district, or at least, I would still ask for an assurance from them, but those in particular are not as important. Although the law simply states that you have the right to opt out of all of them, so there's not really a downside unless, the downside really is that if a teacher can't look at exams and make decisions like in the near term based on them, your child might have some disadvantage because the teacher doesn't get the feedback. But anything that goes up beyond the district, anything that goes into a value-added measure, steer clear of. Smarter Balanced for sure.
Jeff, I want to throw the next question on there real quick. What do you suggest parents of high schoolers do as far as opting out goes when preparing for college? What tests, if any, are they required for college?
Well, the tests that are required for college are the full-on ACT test or the full-on SAT test, and that depends on the colleges you're applying to. So you should check that. If your student has, has a couple colleges on their list, you need to check what they're going to need and then prepare for those tests. ACT is a company in addition to a test. So what's being given to kids in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade are not the ACT test. There are various other tests developed by the ACT company. Those are tests that you could opt out of. They're all tests, even the full-on ACT is aligned with Common Core, but you don't really have a choice if you want to get into College X that requires an ACT to not take it.
Thank you. This one's from Dr. Stotsky. Please describe how the Common Core standards will impact math and science in high school and future STEM careers.
Well, to begin with, they will impact them negatively. There's a great deal that's been written by Professor James Milgram on the math standards, and anyone who wants further details could look at his 2-page handout on the missing standards in Common Core math. And as as he points out, it tops out at about a weak Algebra 2, and that there are missing standards that would allow a student to get to a Calculus 1 or an advanced math course for a freshman year in college. The science standards, next generation science standards that Achieve has put out, which I believe Wisconsin has not yet adopted but may, are correlated with the Common Core math standards, and they are even worse. They, for the most part, do not provide enough standards for an adequate course in high school chemistry, and they make the lab-based physics course in grade 11 and 12 unteachable because the math isn't there. And those who are interested in the specific deficiencies of those next generation science standards could look at reviews, one of which is on the Fordham Institute website, but they are under the leadership of a scientist named Paul Gross. And if you look at Paul Gross, Larry Lerner, who's a physicist, and Google next generation science standards, you'll pick up the blogs that they have written, as well as the report, to indicate that there are going to be fewer students able to take advanced math and science courses in our high schools if a high school strictly stays with the Common Core standards. Now, what may happen is that high schools may teach what they need to teach, so this can vary across high schools, but if one stays only with Common Core's math standards, there are serious equity issues that will develop because parents who are mathematically sophisticated in communities where they can influence what is in the high school curriculum will make sure that a full trigonometry course is there, or that a full pre-calculus course is there. But in high schools with low enrollment in these courses will disappear. So low-income students in high schools that have been low achieving in general are not apt to have the full complement of courses, advanced courses, for students who may be able to take them. We simply don't know what is going to happen because there will be individual variations in local school systems. But the standards are clear as far as their limitations are concerned.
Very good. This was for Dr. Thompson. What is it specifically about Common Core's CAT testing that causes anxiety, fear, and stress? Is it the CAT, the content, the duration? Did the Iowa Basics cause that? They were given every other year.
One specific thing is, I don't know, at least when I grew up, when I was in school, you always had your parents say, now make sure you go back and check your answers. Or push click, bye-bye. If you have an anxiety disorder, you are obsessive compulsive, and push that click, you want to go back and check, that's not happening. There goes the brain. I mean, you're already going right at that point the second you have one of those mental health disorders, and that's not accommodated for. And that can't be accommodated for. Just the pressure cooker in general. I know nothing about the Iowa 9 test at all, but that's just one specific example.
I might jump in here too, because I think one of the things that really ramps this up on kids is simply the accountability aspect of it. They have to feel what the teacher's got to be emitting, if not on a conscious level, that my job's on the line, kids, we've got to do good today. Okay, get it, you know, that comes everywhere from get a good night's rest before, all of it, which is all good advice, but it's given so much and stressed so much how important it is, how important this is to your future, how important this is to my future. And this is all put on little kids. So then they have to take this test that's already like pushing them, and they're going to end up being anxious. I don't think that was there with the Iowa test. It was kind of, yeah, we compared, you know, school to school maybe, but that's about the extent of it.
Thank you. Somebody asked, is anyone going to mention that Mary Burke's support supports Common Core. You just did. Close reading, Dr. Stotsky. Could you please define close reading? What are the pros and cons of close reading? What are your assessment of close reading?
Close reading is a technique, a strategy for reading poetry that was developed maybe 50, 60 years ago by two well-known English literary scholars who became professors at Yale, Leon Brooks and Robert Penn Warren. It was, as I say, developed for the reading of poetry. They were trying to get away from using the context, the poet's life, and so on, as a way to interpret poetry. The term, the phrase, the strategy has been adopted by David Coleman, who went to Yale and took some English courses while he was there. I'm sorry to personalize it, but that's where he got the brilliant idea that somehow this is what we need for informational texts. And he has not yet demonstrated how it would be used with a poem, which is what it was developed for. Close reading means that you're simply looking at what is in a piece of text and not looking at the context or the history of that text. But it was not developed for the reading of historical documents or for the study of other areas of information. Close reading, literal reading, which is what it sounds like. Our literal reading is something that's an old term in the field of reading. Close reading is a literary strategy that has now been generalized to informational reading, and it's without its roots in what it was for.
I think this flows into the next question. How does the school district replace all of the curriculum that has been purchased since the addition of Common Core?
Well, I'm not sure why it would replace everything, depending upon what it has adopted. But let me just speak about English language arts. If there is a good literature anthology, an English teacher who's been well trained should be able to figure out what to use from that literature anthology. There may be more informational selections than the teacher might want to teach. But again, usually the older literature anthologies were 4 times bigger than what one needed to allow for teachers to have a wide range of choices to draw upon. So I'm not sure what kinds of materials school systems have adopted. In math, if they have adopted Common Core math, there may be some serious issues because there will be a need to supplement if they really want to make sure their kids can do a strong Algebra 1 course in grade 8 and a strong Algebra 2 course in whatever grade they would teach Algebra 2. And if they want to do a proof-based approach to Euclidean geometry, they will need a textbook in geometry, and there are some. Mathematicians can guide you, and you have plenty of them at the University of Wisconsin who can tell you what good older math textbooks are still available. Anyone who taught math knows about the Dolciani series, which we use for about 30 years in most schools, in most countries, and older math teachers all trained on them. If you can find one in a bottom drawer, use it. You just have to ask around. Common Core math is not going to be very good.
All right, I'll throw a softball down to Kirsten. What resources has the data we can use to win this argument?
Well, one of the difficulties of Common Core research and refuting what we're being told about Common Core is that the information sources are so disparate, and they can vary somewhat depending on what angle they're coming from. So again, sources, maybe from the left have focused on certain aspects of the problem, and those who are the resources that are coming from the right have focused on others. This is the value of a book like Common Ground and Common Core, and part of what I worked very hard to do with this book as an editor is create a tool that would literally put some of the biggest issues about Common Core into a single book. And it's really kind of remarkable, the people that we've been able to assemble within the pages of a single book, but again, across the political spectrum, on everything from how this happened and how it shouldn't have happened to, the problems with the validation committee. Dr. Stotsky is the only person to do double duty in the volume. She wrote on the validation committee and on the English language arts standards, on the math standards. So the standards per se, we look at what this does to students, we look at what this does to the craft of teaching, we look at what this does in terms of kids with special needs. There's just a whole range of issues that get compiled into a single volume that you can then literally hand to anyone of any political stripe. We worked very hard to make sure the essays, even though you can tell where some of the people, the authors are along the political spectrum, we worked very hard to strip out language that would shut readers down to what they had to say. We stuck really to issues as much as we could, so that again, you can hand it to anybody. That's legislators, teachers, parents, anybody of any political stripe. So hopefully, watch the website, resoundingbooks.com, or our Facebook page, Resounding Books. We're kind of keeping people informed there about when the book is coming out. We're super, super close now, so.
Is that .com or .org?
.org. Thank you.
And if I may add, in our fight against Common Core, one of the biggest issues has been overcoming the myths that the opponents have been talking about for a long while, in hopes that if they repeat it long enough and hard enough, that it will become truth. And I think this book, I'm very excited to know about it, will help us to have proof that to refute these myths. So thank you, Dr. Lombard, for writing such a book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll throw this one to whoever wants to take it. How do we show accountability that students are learning if we don't test?
I'm sorry, can you say, was that to me?
Whoever wants to take it.
What was it?
I would like
We
to
can all answer that one.
I would like to say, first of all, we've always tested. There have always been teacher-made tests. What did we do before standards and state tests? People have short memories. I mean, teachers used to be trained to make tests. There was a course I remember taking on the construction of classroom tests in the education schools. At least it used to be there. I don't know if it's there anymore. But the point is, that was what we depended upon for most of K-12 years ago, and we did quite well with most of the tests. There were some college entrance exams, and I'd like to suggest matriculation exams that could be developed by your university or higher education system, which used to exist in this country before the college boards were developed, SATs and then ACTs. But we need to go back to having teachers construct tests that are based on what they've taught kids, and having parents be able to see, literally, the tests that their teachers have created, because that was what kids used to bring home. They would bring home the tests that their teachers created, marked, graded, and parents had a good idea of what was going on in the school. And I don't know how much of this is going to take place under Common Core yet.
Our clinic makes a living off of testing. We like data, we like testing, but the difference is we use tests that are valid, that are proven. We don't and can't experiment on your kids. There is not a school district in the United States of America that has the accuracy level of when you take a kid to a really experienced pediatric neuropsychologist in terms of cognitions, achievement, and your emotions. It's not even close. It's just about accuracy and validity, and the SBAC test, despite anything that they say, has absolutely no published validity whatsoever, and absolutely zero validity or instructional value for the ground level teacher. They didn't didn't write this test to measure your kid's achievement. They wrote this test to get your kid's data.
Accountability is something that kind of really irks me, the way it's thrown around in the state. Up at the legislature last session, they tried passing an accountability law with all sorts of ways of shutting schools down if they didn't measure up. And I think it's totally misguided that the state hold people accountable. And it sort of gets into this whole notion of we don't want to dirty ourselves with dealing with the issue ourselves. You know, the accountability should be between you and the teacher, and if you have a problem with it, and your student. And if you have a problem there, maybe go to the principal and maybe then the superintendent, but it shouldn't go beyond that. Maybe the school board, then, I guess, you have no satisfaction. That's who should be accountable. Parents should hold you accountable, but you gotta interact and explain yourself. No one wants to do that. They want to wait. They want to wait for the state to tell you whether that teacher was good or not. And I guess, it's nice for the school district, right? Because if your student's having a problem and you want to hold someone accountable, they can come to you and say, well, the teacher, their score says they're a good teacher, so it must be your problem.
I would like to echo that. I've been a teacher now for 41 years, and for about the first 20 years of my teaching career, we truly didn't teach the standards. We didn't have standards. Now, does that mean that we weren't accountable to our fellow teachers, to our parents, to our students? No. My opinion is that we truly felt more of as we discussed, Dr. Lomar discussed, it was a personal relationship because we were talking to the parents, to the principal. We knew the members of the school board, and not that I'm opposed to standards, but I think to test to the standards is absolutely wrong.
Thank you. Very cognizant of everyone's time, we're way over, so I'm going to cut off the questions right now. A lot of questions are regarding where are the groups located that we can connect with. Anybody that has a group, please connect with us. On our website, we will have an email address that you can send your information to, and if you're willing to link up with us, we're more than happy to share that information and continue this moving forward. I'll start with Mary at the end and just go through final thoughts if anybody wants to give a final thought before we go, and then we'll wrap it up for you. Then I want to thank everybody again for coming out on a Sunday afternoon and spending some time learning about education issues and caring about our kids. It's important that we spread this message. If we don't fight this now, we may lose total control of our schools. Our school boards will become completely irrelevant, and it won't matter who you complain to anymore. We won't have any control. So it's important that we step up and do something now. This has got to be the fight that everybody jumps on board with. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. It's important that you help us. Thank you.
My thoughts, I would like to encourage you to take action, take it now. This is a very, very serious matter. Don't dismiss it.
My final thought to you is be talking to people that you are not accustomed to talking to. Find the common ground, because that is how we're going to reach the critical mass that we need to stop this in Wisconsin and get it turned.
My final thought's kind of an assignment, and that's the assignment I usually give when I talk to people and they ask, what can I do? And that is, it's very simple. It's not even a Common Core right now. Your first step, if you're in a subdivision, figure out who each of your neighbors' names are. You'd be surprised how many of you don't know that. And then maybe just go introduce yourself if you haven't before. And that's the start. Then maybe it'll be easy a week or two from now to start talking about Common Core. But you've got to start. Okay, it's great you all came out and learned a bunch of stuff today, but you got to do it. And the battle's going to be in every neighborhood.
Parents are, and must always be, the resident experts around children.
Couple of words on accountability. This has become one of the war cries of the latest movements for massive state and national testing. And what is interesting when one looks at other countries, students are considered accountable. for their own learning. And we now have a situation in which their teachers are being held accountable for their learning. There is some problem in the way this has shifted from years ago when students were held accountable for what they learned to making their teachers accountable for what they learned. Somehow we need to get back a little bit to students and parents being somewhat accountable. Also, teachers are not the only ones involved in a child's education. And we've got to combat Common Core on some common sense grounds that the teachers are not the only people responsible for what a child does in school.
Thank you, everyone. I second those remarks and those comments, and I want to thank everybody again for coming. Please drive home safely. Have a safe trip.